Welcome to Player Profiler Today News, your go-to source for the latest updates and insight in the world of fantasy football. I'm Mike Lindbergh Grindberg, and today is Wednesday, August 28th. In our first segment, we're going to be diving into the whirlwind of the NFL Cut Day and breaking down how these pivotal roster decisions can shake up your fantasy football leagues. From the Buffalo Bills to the New England Patriots and the Miami Dolphins, we've got you covered. We'll analyze key cuts from teams like the Browns, the Steelers, and the Texans to see how these changes might affect your lineup. Stick around as we will unravel the potential fantasy implications of trades and roster cuts around the league. We'll explore how these moves could open up opportunities for emerging stars and what it means for your fantasy draft strategy. Stay tuned for all the latest updates and analysis to keep you ahead of the game this fantasy season. So let's get you started with our top stories. Cut Day is always a pivotal moment for both real life and fantasy football leagues, and this year's decisions have already set the stage for some intriguing shifts in player value. From surprising cuts to strategic trades, the moves made by the NFL teams are bound to influence the fantasy landscape. Today, we are focusing on the biggest moves from teams across the league and analyzing their potential impacts on fantasy rosters. Whether it's the Buffalo Bills shaking up their receiving core, the Miami Dolphins reworking their quarterback depth, or the Chiefs making bold changes in their receiving core, we've got you covered. Stay tuned as we break down these key decisions, starting with the Buffalo Bills, and they made a subtle but noteworthy move during the NFL Cut Day. While the team didn't make any drastic roster changes, the decision to waive wide receiver Tyrell Shavers was a standout. Shavers has been a promising player throughout camp, and he leaves a receiving core that is now left with Khalil Shakir as the returning slot receiver from last year, alongside key additions like Curtis Samuel, Keon Coleman, Mac Hollins at MVS. It's not like Shavers was in the market of making this team, but it's nice to know that they have the depth. You know, fantasy gamers, this reshuffling indicates that Shakir is the new receiver that could have a significant role, especially as Samuel and Valdez-Scantling health concerns remain aware. So the Miami Dolphins made headlines by releasing quarterback Mike White, opting instead to keep Skylar Thompson as their primary backup behind Tua Tagovailoa. Thompson's strong preseason performance and command of the offense convinced the coaching staff to make the move. The New England Patriots, they decided to waive quarterback Bailey Zappe, leaving rookie Drake May and Joe Milton behind starter Jacoby Brissett. Actually, it looks like Jake May might have that inside track at that starting role. He has impressed now, so we're going to have to keep a close eye on that competition. Additionally, the Patriots opted for veteran kicker Joe Sly over the 2024 Chad Ryland pick. So it's configuring their offense here a little bit more. Let's see what happens going forward now with these New England Patriots. There's a lot of spotlight on this team headed into 2024. Drake May, who was passed on by the Washington Commanders for Jaden Daniels. We'll see how that move, in fact, impacts the future here at the quarterback situation, because we've seen some pretty sweet legs from Drake May over this preseason, and it's important to note that his legs could be fantasy relevant in 2024, especially if he's named the starter. Now, the New York Jets surprise move involved trading rookie cornerback and return specialist Codrington to the Buffalo Bills. The trade, it makes room for Xavier Gipson here. That's the key moment that we're looking for. Gipson might have an opportunity now to make that, play some role in that offense now that he's got that kick returning ability here. So let's talk about the Bengals. And, they're in a position here where we may have thought that they might have been in the market to pick up a guy like Samaje Perine, who was just cut by the Denver Broncos. But we're going to get into the Chiefs a little bit later on, and that's no go. So looks like a guy like Chase Brown is who's been steamed up in the preseason. His role looks pretty secure right now, and hopefully it continues that way throughout the season for Chase Brown. Now, there is a major move retaining all four quarterbacks. That is the Cleveland Browns, Deshaun Watson, Jameson Wilson, and while releasing veteran running back Deonta Foreman. This decision suggests that the Browns are willing to explore trade options for their backup quarterbacks. Fantasy gamers, the reduction in running back depth might open up opportunities for Jerome Ford and other backs to gain increased roles. I'm hearing this might be just a move to get him on the practice roster. So he may be back, Foreman, with the Cleveland Browns. The Pittsburgh Steelers, they made a move, including releasing wide receiver Quez Watkins. That's not a super big surprise. They have a receiving core of Calvin Austin that potentially could be getting some starting snaps here with the uncertainty of Roman Wilson's injury. He still hasn't been practicing too much with the team here. So look for Calvin Austin to probably have a spot on that roster right away, especially if Roman Wilson isn't available. And George Pickens is the standout there. So we will see what happens in Pittsburgh. There is, still that rumor trading floating around about the Brandon Ayuk trade, and maybe the Steelers are still part of that. The Steelers did, however, name their starting quarterback for 2024 today, and that is none other than Russell Wilson. It's not a huge surprise for many fantasy gamers out there that have been following that competition closely. Russell Wilson, he's the veteran. He's the guy that's going to manage that offense, and he's not quite what he used to be. So I'm looking for them to be on somewhat of a tighter leash with him, especially with the way Fields played in the preseason. So there could be some optimism there that Fields may get some looks early in this season. So the Houston Texans made waves by releasing wide receiver Noah Brown. That's not a huge surprise considering what they did this offseason by signing Nico Collins long-term, bringing in Stephon Diggs, and they still have the rookie and the sophomore now in in Tank Dell. So, that wide receiver group is really strong, and we're going to look for them to be continuing down the line here. Now, the Colts, they decided to keep quarterback Sam Ehlinger over running back Evan Hall. The move underscores their commitment to maintaining depth at quarterback, especially with starter Jonathan Taylor, at running back, especially with Taylor's ongoing situation. Hall's release may impact the Colts running back situation, potentially elevating Trey Sermon and Tyler Godson in your fantasy leagues. Now, moving on to the Tennessee Titans, their most impactful move was trading quarterback Malik Willis, and now he's no longer with the team. And the Denver Broncos made a big move here, and a lot of people were thinking that Tim Patrick was on the up and up here with the Denver Broncos, but it's not going to be that case. Potentially, they were using him to showcase him in a trade or something like that because Tim Patrick is no longer a Denver Bronco. And, with his departure, young wide receivers like Troy Franklin and, Marvin Mims could have an opportunity here. Fantasy gamers should keep an eye on how the Broncos receiving core evolves and how it impacts their overall production. Now, the Chiefs also released a wide receiver, and that was Kadarius Toney, and somewhat of a surprising move considering his high expectations from last year. Toney's departure opens up opportunities for the other wide receivers. Xavier Worthy is the note one. He's the guy that they brought in. They invested that high draft capital on in the first round. They moved up to secure him. So look for Xavier Worthy, especially with the Marquise Brown injury, to really be a factor here. Now, the Raiders, they made the decision to keep just two quarterbacks, Gardner Minshew and Aiden O'Connell, while releasing Nathan Peterman. This streamlined their approach that could impact the team's flexibility and depth at quarterback. Fantasy gamers, Minshew's presence as a starter could offer some value if he performs well, especially in deeper leagues. But he's just he's a career backup at this stage that is getting some starter reps. That he's obviously not going to be the future of the Las Vegas Raiders, so it's kind of a perplexing decision to start him. But to me, anyhow. The Raiders potentially, if they don't start out the gate strong, they could move on and see once again what Aiden O'Connell, the youngster, has. But that's something to be desired here. The Chargers, they decided to keep 7 wide receivers. That's unexpected. It could indicate a shift in their offensive strategy. I remember the Chiefs did that last year. It was such an interesting situation. The move suggests a potential increase in passing attempts or a focus of utilizing a diverse receiving group. Fantasy gamers should consider the implications of wide receiver usage and the potential value of these wide receivers in the Chargers offense. There's a lot of folks out there skeptical about how Justin Herbert will perform, especially, now that Harbaugh's there, a more run-centric offense, and we'll see what happens there. It'd be interesting to see. Now, let's get a little message here from the Podfather and, give everybody an update on what's going on with our injury finder.
Hey, you're in your fantasy draft and someone says, hey, that guy's injury prone. I don't want him. And you're like, I don't know. I don't think you can predict injuries. Well, guess what? Now you can. Injury proneness is real. At Player Profiler, we have the data on these players, and it's all in the Injury Finder app. Their injury track record back through time, exactly where they were injured, how severe it is. We look at the BMI data, and we crunch it all together, and we give you probabilities that a player will miss multiple games this NFL season, as well as the complete database of NFL injuries and the ability to compare two players and look at their injury track record. The Injury Finder is powerful, and it's only $5. If it's worth it to have that peace of mind when you're drafting, go get it.
Now, moving on to the NFC, and the Cowboys released a host of other players, including wide receiver Deontay Burnett and running back Malik Davis. The Cowboys went on and they signed a free agent running back Dalvin Cook today. It'll be interesting to see how he slides into this running back room that now consists of Rico Dowdle and Ezekiel Elliott. James Cook. Dalvin Cook's entrance into the Cowboys offense. It raises some concerns in my eye now that people that have got these Rico Dowdle shares, that might put a little bit of a wrench into that, into the value that could be, stealing some of those red zone carries from Ezekiel Elliott. It could be a nightmare to follow this year with the Dallas Cowboys going with the hot hand. So, yeah, that's an interesting situation. We weren't, most of us weren't 100% convinced that the Dallas Cowboys were going to go into 2024 with Rico Dowdle and Ezekiel Elliott as their number 1 and 2 backs. And now they bring in another guy like Dalvin Cook, who's had success in the NFL. We know he was a fantasy football guru for many years there. So I'm skeptical to see if there's anything left in the tank with Dalvin Cook. We saw a regression last year in New York, especially after, Breece Hall was coming back from his injury. He had the opportunity to really thrive there, and he didn't. So we will see what happens now with that situation there in Dallas. Now the Eagles, they made some headlines. They did retain, James Bradberry, which was a great move for them. For fantasy gamers, there's not much happening in that, but they did cut a couple guys like wide receiver Paris Campbell and Austin Watkins. We know what happened, with the Eagles in the last little while here. So we will see what goes on there. And AJ Brown, and Devonta Smith, they're going to be the cornerstones there. The Eagles brought in Jahan Dotson, and that's a huge move for them. That gives a lot of stability in that wide receiving group. Now, some notable changes, nothing too crazy here going with Washington. The Chicago Bears, they made some roster decisions. They retained Velus Jones, who was somebody that people thought was on the cut list. He had an incredible, preseason, and now he's on the team. Fantasy gamers not going to add much value to us because for the Bears, he's more of a complementary piece there with some punt return, options there. The Lions, they cut veteran wide receiver Donovan Peoples-Jones to keep their second-year quarterback Hendon Hooker as their primary backup. That's pretty noteworthy. Hooker's potential to step into a larger role if Jared Goff is injured makes him a valuable stash in dynasty leagues. Peoples-Jones' release opens up more opportunities for other wide receivers like Josh Reynolds and potentially Jameson Williams, who has been, slotted in as the wide receiver too there in Detroit. So many situations to monitor here. And another one is a surprising one here. We knew that A.J. Dillon was banged up headed into the season here, but the decision to place him on IR and their running back situation is a significant development with Dillon out. The competition for RB2 spot between Marshawn Lloyd and Emmanuel Wilson becomes crucial. For fantasy gamers, monitoring this competition could reveal valuable depth pieces. Now, if you're in a deep league, I'd be looking at picking up Emmanuel Wilson. I know it's already a day removed from the A.J. Dillon news. So if you're in a league that has a once-a-week waiver wire pickup type scenario, if you haven't drafted yet, he's a guy I would have on my radar as a deep sleeper because we know that, the Packers, they don't always have a group of running backs that can stay healthy throughout the year. So Emmanuel Wilson could be a pickup that could be very, very fortuitous to you guys as the season goes on. Now, the Atlanta Falcons made a surprising decision to keep veteran Taylor Heineke as their third quarterback. For fantasy football, Heineke's presence could impact the team's overall quarterback depth behind Kirk Cousins. Maybe that is signaling a not so great recovery from Kirk Cousins. Maybe Atlanta is seeing some things that they don't like out of his development right now. So, keeping that third quarterback is more of a safety net, in my opinion. So we'll see what happens there. The release of Terrence Marshall Jr. by the Carolina Panthers is a noteworthy development. Despite having a solid camp, Marshall's lack of special teams contributions and past performances led to his release. This move opens up opportunities for other receivers in Carolina, which would impact fantasy leagues. I'm very high on Deontay Johnson headed into 2024. I've talked about it in length on a lot of different shows. He's a guy that is known for his separating abilities. Matt Harmon's perception reception has him ranked as one of the best all-time separators that he's ever charted. So Bryce Young needed somebody that can get into space really fast, separate, and he got the best one in the league. So expect a target pepperage for Deontay Johnson in 2024. Cutting Terrence Marshall is just going to add to that layer. Now, the Bucks, they had not many big roster moves. We're going to skip over them. The Arizona Cardinals, they released running back Michael Carter. It was somewhat unexpected. Carter's departure might lead to some more significant roles for the remaining running backs like James Conner and Trey Benson. For fantasy gamers, this could be the opportunity to grab an undervalued player so far in redraft leagues like a Trey Benson, and he could definitely emerge in this offense, especially if something were to happen to James Conner. So the San Francisco 49ers placed our running back Elijah Mitchell on IR, and this is a significant development. Mitchell's absence opens up opportunities for other running backs like Jordan Mason. So if you're on the waiver wire, like I mentioned about our previous a guy there, Emmanuel Wilson, we got to have Jordan Mason on your radar here, folks. Jordan Mason, go to your deep leagues here. He's the primary backup right now to Christian McCaffrey, and that is a good role to be behind there. So look for your waiver wire ads. And folks, if you're enjoying the show, don't miss out on our exclusive content. Subscribe to the Player Profiler YouTube channel at Profiler. Player Profiler News. Follow us on Twitter at profiler_NFL and check us out on our website at www.playerprofiler.com/news for all the latest and breaking news and its impact on fantasy football. Stay the head of the game with Player Profiler. Now, some news coming out of Kansas City. I mentioned it briefly earlier, and they signed veteran running back Samaje Perine, and this could, his current role, he is initially being slated in behind Isaiah Pacheco, Clyde Edwards-Helaire, and rookie Carson Steele as the RB4. It's going to limit his fantasy value. He's had some past performances. Last year, Perine, he rushed for 53 carries, 238 yards, and a 1 touchdown. He added 50 receptions for 455 yards, showcasing his PPR potential. So there's nobody really in the Kansas City Chiefs backfield that has any sort of real big pass catching chops. If you think about it now, with the cut of Deneric Prince and Amani Bailey here, so they don't really have a pass catching back, and this might be the with the departure of Jerick McKinnon, this could be a replacement here. So he could have some PPR value. His receiving ability makes him a more appealing late round pick or bench stash. So we're going to keep an eye on this usage and the health, essentially, of the Kansas City Chiefs running backs. His value could rise if he gets more opportunities, and that's all it takes is an opportunity. So in deep or PPR leagues, consider Perine as a speculative add. He's a low-risk, potential high-reward player. Draft and trade. If drafting soon, target Perine probably really, really late, maybe a dart throw and here and there. If you own him, be open to trade. In his role expands, consider him as a potential trade target. Overall, Perine is not a top priority. His move to the Chiefs makes him a player to watch for the potential value in deeper leagues or for a future as a pickup in fantasy, in the fantasy circles here. Big news the other day that we're just going to kind of recash here is CeeDee Lamb reached that 4-year lucrative deal for $136 million to end the standoff. As usual, Jerry Jones and the Cowboys made waves this offseason. They always like to have the spotlight on them. Lamb's holdout was one of the biggest headlines, and it created some anxiety for fantasy gamers with draft season right now happening. Fortunately, there's good news. Lamb and the Cowboys have finally struck their deal, the 4-year, $136 million contract that makes him, one of the highest paid wide receivers in NFL history. This deal means Lamb is staying put and should ease some of the worries about his availability. In terms of fantasy, well, we know Lamb was a rock star last year, ranking very, very high. He finished as the, wide receiver 1 or 2, depending on your format. His late season surge saw him lead the league in targets, finishing 2nd in receiving yards, 1st in yards after the catch, and 5th in yards per route run. He firmly established himself as one of the top-tier wide receivers and is expected to continue as the Cowboys' go-to guy in their pass-heavy offense. Looking ahead to 2024, the Cowboys seem stuck in their past first approach. Well, they've added Dalvin Cook and Zeke to their backfield. They haven't made major moves to upgrade their receiving core, so Lamb will remain the top target, and I assume he's going to get peppered early and often. Now, some interesting news coming out of Los Angeles, and the Rams saved a roster spot by making Kyren Williams their punt returner. McVay announced the decision after being asked why receiver Xavier Smith didn't make the final 53-man roster. Kyren is going to be our punt returner. It's another opportunity to get touches and impact the game. Not so great if you're a fantasy gamer here. If you think that Kyren Williams stock was low now, it might drop even more if he's going to be exposed to more contact in the kicking game. He was a standout last year. He played 12 games, 2023, while averaged 21 touches per game, 3rd most in the NFL. He missed 4 games to an ankle injury he had in the middle of the season. the Rams did select Corum in the third round of this draft to help take some of the workload off. However, Williams remains in line for the bulk of the reps so far. Corum has been seen with the ones in preseason, so it's not out of the realm for him to see a decent amount of work coming out of the gate. The bigger takeaway from McVay's comments is that Corum and Rivers would spell Williams in the backfield if need be. So Corum could earn more carries as the season goes on, but the rookie's primary job to open the season appears to be an insurance in case Williams goes down with an injury, then as someone who will siphon a significant number of touches. I don't know about that. There is a lot of speculation here about Corum's role. I see him, regardless of how much they're going to run Kyron, they're going to have to find a way to get Corum in there. And I think they're going to do it right away, early and opt-in. So I'm not drafting a whole lot of Kyron Williams in my drafts. I never had. So those of you who have them, I'm sure there are some red flags going on right now, especially with the kick return news. And we're going to have to continue to monitor that one as we head forward here. Now, another interesting decision is the Denver Broncos. Not so interesting because they put a lot of capital in here, but they have announced that Bo Nix will start at quarterback week 1 against the Seattle Seahawks after being drafted 12th overall. Bo Nix is set to be the quarterback of the future for the Broncos. Nix joined a quarterback room with Stidham and Wilson after the Broncos moved on from Russell Wilson this past offseason, and he has officially won the starting job. He showed promise in his first 2 preseason games, completing 23 of 30 passes for 205 yards and 2 touchdowns, no interceptions. In comparison, Stidham led 6 drives this preseason, producing 1 touchdown for the team and throwing 2 interceptions. Sean Payton's offense seems to be in a nice fit for Nix as he excels in getting the ball out quickly, drawing some comparison to how Payton ran offenses with Drew Brees at the helm. Nix is a sure starter in Superflex leagues as a QB2 upside in redrafts. The Broncos look to be a struggling team this year, which could provide passing game tricks for Nix. For dynasty gamers, Nix is being named the starter is huge for his development. It would have been extremely concerning had he not been able to beat out Stidham. Nix does have age concerns as a 24-year-old rookie, but starting right away definitely dampens those concerns now. Yeah, that's been a busy 24 hours here in NFL football. So, I've covered quite a bit of news here. There's going to be a lot more coming down, and we're just over 1 week away from Thursday night football and the opener. So this is going to be awesome, folks. We've waited all off season. It is getting close. Drafts are wrapping up. It's now time for in-season management. And it's go time, folks. So that's a wrap for today's episode of Player Profiler Today. Thanks for tuning in as we discussed the NFL Cut Day and its ripples effects of fantasy football. Be sure to hit that subscribe button and ring the notification bell so you're always up to date with the latest news and insights. We want to hear from you, so drop your thoughts and questions and comments below. Your fantasy dilemmas and strategies are always welcome. For more in-depth analysis, follow us on Twitter at profiler_NFL and visit playerprofiler.com for breaking news and detailed breakdowns. And if you're gearing up for draft season, don't miss out on the world famous Draft Kit. It's your ultimate guide to dominating your leagues. Thanks again for joining me. I'm Mike Lindbergh, Grindberg. Until next time, keep your lineups sharp and your strategies sharper. Until next episode, this is Player Profiler Today.
From the Podfather to you, I deeply appreciate you tuning in. And many ask, what can I do? What can I do to help support the hosts, the research they do, the production costs? Go to playerprofiler.com, Dynasty Deluxe, World Famous Draft Kit, Rankings, DFS Dominator, and of course, data analysis. Subscribe to any one of those, and you support all of us and take Player Profiler to the moon.